Hey everyone, and welcome to The Deep Dive. We're about to jump into some really cool stuff today.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking about genes.
All right.
And to do that, we're going to be taking a deep dive into The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins.
That's a classic.
So if you've ever wondered how these tiny little things called genes make you, well, you,
Yeah.
then stick around, because we're about to find out.
I think it's so fascinating because, we forget sometimes that we're a part of nature and, we're connected to all these other living things
Right.
in a very special way. And genes are kind of the key to understanding how that works.
Yeah, it's like the instruction manual for life.
Exactly.
So Dawkins starts out by talking about just the incredible variety of
Yeah.
life on Earth.
It's unbelievable.
You've got like octopuses who can change color. They're super smart.
Yeah.
You've got tiny little mice that, seem to be everywhere.
They get into everything.
And then you've got like giant oak trees that can live for hundreds of years.
It's amazing, right?
It's just mind-blowing how different everything is.
It is. But here's the thing that's so cool. Despite all those differences, every living thing from a tiny worm
Right.
to a giant elephant, they share the same basic building blocks.
Wow.
They all have this special molecule called DNA, and it's like a set of instructions for building life.
So it's like a universal language
Exactly.
that everyone speaks, even if they look and act totally different.
It's like a blueprint.
Right. And Dawkins even talks about this example of how scientists found DNA in this tiny little worm
Man.
that lives in German beer mats.
Wow. I did not know that.
I know, who would have thought.
Yeah.
DNA is everywhere.
It is, and it's really cool, too, because this DNA, this instruction manual, it's actually shaped like a twisted ladder.
What?
It's called a double helix.
Okay.
So imagine a ladder
Yeah.
that's twisted into a spiral.
I can picture that.
That's what DNA looks like.
That's a cool way to picture it.
Yeah.
It's like we have this twisted ladder inside of us.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But what do those instructions actually do?
Right.
How do they make a living thing?
Well, DNA has like two superpowers.
Okay.
First, it can copy itself,
Okay.
which is how we grow from a single cell into a whole person.
Right.
Every time a cell divides, it makes a copy that's DNA so that each new cell
Right.
has a full set of instructions.
Oh, so it's like a self-copying blueprint.
Yeah, you got it.
That's pretty amazing.
It is.
But how do those instructions actually get turned into a living, breathing person?
That's DNA's second superpower.
Okay.
It tells the cells how to build proteins.
Proteins.
Yeah. So think of proteins like tiny building blocks that make up everything in your body, from your hair and skin
Uh-huh.
to your muscles and bones.
Oh, so proteins are the things that make us strong. I thought proteins were like the stuff in food.
You're right. We do get proteins from food,
Right.
but those proteins get broken down into their building blocks.
Okay.
And then our bodies use those building blocks following the instructions in our DNA
Uh-huh.
to build new proteins that are specifically designed for our own bodies.
So it's like we have a Lego set,
Yeah,
and the DNA is the instruction booklet.
exactly.
And then the proteins are like all the Legos we use to build something awesome.
Perfect analogy.
I like that.
And it's important to remember those proteins don't just build things, they control all the chemical reactions that are happening inside of our cells,
Oh, wow.
which is what keeps us alive and functioning.
So it's a lot of responsibility for tiny little proteins.
You could say that, yeah.
But how do we get our DNA in the first place?
We inherit it from our parents.
Oh.
So it's like getting a mix of their instruction booklets,
Okay.
which is why we often resemble our parents in some ways.
So that's why I have my mom's eyes
Maybe.
and my dad's curly hair.
Exactly.
It's all thanks to DNA.
It all comes back to DNA.
Yeah, and so this idea of inheritance is super important because it helps us understand
Oh, yeah,
how life has changed and adapted over millions of years.
for sure.
You mean evolution.
Right.
But how do genes play a part in that?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like a race where the fastest runners pass on their speedy genes.
Right.
And over time, those winning genes shape the way life looks and behaves.
Okay, so it's like natural selection, the best genes survive and they make more copies of themselves.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
So if genes are all about survival, why do we get old and eventually die?
Right.
Wouldn't genes that keep us alive forever be the ultimate winners?
That's a great question. You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Natural selection, that competition we talked about, it's really focused on making sure we survive long enough to have children and pass on our genes.
Uh-huh.
After that, it becomes less important.
So genes that might cause problems when we're older can still get passed down
Right.
as long as they help us when we're young and having babies.
Exactly. It's like a car that's guaranteed to run perfectly for the first few years, but after that, the warranty runs out.
Oh.
It might still work for a while, but it's not guaranteed.
That's a funny way to think about it. But if that's the case, couldn't we like try to trick our genes into thinking we're younger than we really are? Like, could we
Interesting.
find a way to like extend that warranty?
That's actually what some scientists are trying to do. There's a whole field of research focused on figuring out why we age.
Oh, wow.
And if there are ways to slow down the process,
So like an anti-aging pill.
potentially they're looking at things like chemical changes in our bodies that might signal to our genes that it's time to get old.
Oh, so if we could change those signals,
Yeah.
maybe we could trick the genes.
Exactly. Maybe someday we'll find a way to fool those genes and stay younger for longer.
That would be awesome.
It would.
But I guess for now, it seems like aging is just part of life.
Yeah, it's part of the natural cycle.
Speaking of life, there's another puzzle that Dawkins talks about,
Okay, what's that?
the paradox of sex.
Hmm.
Like, why do we bother mixing our genes with someone else's
Right.
when we could just, like, make copies of ourselves?
Like cloning.
Yeah, exactly.
It does seem a bit strange, doesn't it?
Yeah. After all, if you want to pass on, like, as many of your genes as possible, making clones of yourself would be the most efficient way,
You would think.
right? Like, why share the spotlight with someone else's genes
Yeah.
when you could have it all to yourself?
It's like sharing your favorite toy when you could keep it all to yourself.
Exactly.
It might seem that way, but from a gene's point of view, mixing things up is actually a really smart strategy.
Really?
Think about it. The world is constantly changing. What might be a good trait today could be a problem tomorrow.
So it's like not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
If you have, like, lots of different combinations of genes, some of them are bound to be helpful no matter what changes happen in the world.
Precisely by shuffling genes together through sex, we create new combinations that increase the chances of survival in an unpredictable world.
So it's like we're hedging our bets
You could say that, yeah.
and creating like a bigger team of players, each with their own unique skills.
Right, like a diverse portfolio.
Ready to face any challenge. That makes a lot of sense. So even though it seems like we're giving up half of our genetic legacy by having kids with someone else, we're actually playing a smarter game in the long run.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, we're giving our genes a better chance of survival.
Right, it's all about maximizing the chances of those genes, those tiny but powerful instructions, surviving and thriving in the ever-changing game of life.
This is all so fascinating. We're starting to see the world through the eyes of our genes,
It's a whole new perspective.
understanding how they shape us and drive this incredible diversity of life on Earth.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the complexity of it all.
But if we're just vehicles for our genes, does that mean we don't have free will?
That's a big one.
Are we just puppets controlled by our DNA?
That's a question that people have been debating for a long time.
Right.
You know, Dawkins acknowledges that the idea of the selfish gene can be a bit unsettling, especially when we think about things like free will and the meaning of life.
Right. It makes you question everything.
It does, but he argues that understanding our genes doesn't make us any less amazing. In fact, it can make us appreciate just how incredible life really is.
How so?
Well, think about it this way. If we are indeed survival machines for our genes, then the very fact that we're capable of having this conversation, of pondering the mysteries of life and the universe, is a testament to the power of those tiny, selfish replicators.
Wow.
They've created something truly extraordinary, conscious beings who can think, feel, and create.
That's pretty profound when you think about it that way.
It is.
So instead of feeling limited by our genes,
Yeah,
we can be inspired by them. They're the driving force behind everything that makes us human.
exactly. It's a whole new way of looking at our place in the world.
But there's still so much more to explore, right?
Oh, absolutely. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into some even more intriguing aspects of the selfish gene, like how it explains things like altruism and the evolution of culture.
So we've been talking about this idea of the selfish gene. You know how these tiny little instructions for life are always like competing and evolving
Right.
to make sure they get passed on.
Yeah.
But here's something I don't get. Like, how can a selfish gene explain why people do nice things for others?
That's a great question.
Like, sometimes people even risk their own safety to help someone else.
Yeah.
It's like giving up your spot on a lifeboat to save a stranger.
Right. It seems counterintuitive.
It does.
If genes are all about survival,
Yeah.
why would they encourage a behavior that seems to put an individual at risk?
Yeah, it's like a puzzle.
It is, and it puzzled scientists for a long time. But Dawkins argues that even these seemingly selfless acts can be understood from the perspective of the selfish gene.
Wait, so even when we're being, like, kind and helpful.
Uh-huh.
It's actually our genes being sneaky and looking out for themselves.
In a way, yeah.
How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. Parents often put themselves in danger to protect their children.
Yeah, that's true.
It's instinctive. And from a gene's perspective, this makes perfect sense. Parents share half of their genes with each child.
Right.
So by protecting their children, they're also protecting copies of their own genes.
So it's like a parent saying, hey, those are my genes in that little kid. I better make sure they survive.
Exactly. It's like an investment in the future of those genes.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah. And this idea can actually be applied to other relationships too. We're more likely to help our siblings or cousins, even our friends, because we share some genes with them.
Right.
Even if it's a smaller percentage than with our children. So by helping those around us, we're indirectly helping our own genes succeed.
So even though it looks like we're being altruistic,
Yeah.
our genes are kind of playing this clever game
Right.
to make sure they get passed on.
It's like this hidden motivation behind our good deeds.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it.
It is, and it leads to some really fascinating ideas about how cooperation evolved. Imagine a group of animals living in a tough environment where food is scarce. The ones who learn to share and work together, they're more likely to survive than those who try to go it alone.
Right. It's like teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. By helping each other out, they increase the chances of the whole group surviving.
Uh-huh.
And that means their genes are more likely to be passed on.
Yeah, so it's like cooperation,
Right.
driven by these shared genes.
Exactly.
And that can help us understand everything from like ant colonies to human societies.
It's a powerful force in shaping social behavior.
Wow. So Dawkins is saying that genes might even be involved in the evolution of culture.
He does?
Culture, you mean like music and art and language?
All that, yeah.
How can genes possibly influence those things?
Well, Dawkins proposes that culture evolves through the spread of what he calls memes.
Memes.
Yeah, think of memes as ideas, behaviors, or styles that get passed from one person to another, kind of like genes get passed down through generations.
Okay.
So a catchy song, a new fashion trend, even a way of thinking
Right.
can become a meme if it spreads quickly and catches on.
So memes are like cultural genes.
Yes,
They're competing for attention,
Uh-huh.
and they're trying to replicate themselves by spreading from one person to another.
Exactly. And just as genes influence our physical traits, memes can shape our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors.
Like how a popular song can get stuck in your head.
Exactly. Or how you might start dressing like your friends.
Right.
Those are memes in action.
Wow. So it's like our minds are this battleground for memes,
In a way.
and the strongest ones survive and spread.
The ones that resonate the most.
That's kind of a crazy thought.
It is, and it opens up a whole new way of thinking about how culture changes and evolves over time.
So while genes might be the architects of our bodies, memes could be considered the architects of our culture.
That's a great way to put it.
This whole selfish gene idea has been a wild ride.
It is a fascinating concept.
It's given us this new lens for understanding life,
Right.
evolution, and even culture itself.
It's a powerful way of thinking about the world, reminding us that even the most complex behaviors and ideas can often be traced back to this simple but relentless drive of genes to replicate and survive.
It's amazing to think that these tiny little instructions for life are behind so much of what we see and experience in the world.
It really is.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring the world with this new perspective in mind.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by the connections you discover. Until next time, keep diving deep.